So anyway, tonight we're going to talk about the Nazca lines. What are the Nazca lines? Some of you may have heard of this. The Nazca lines are in Peru, the Altiplano of Peru, uh, between the Andes Mountains and the oceans just north of Cusco. It's out in the middle of, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And these amazing line drawings are in the sand. Basically, I'll describe how this actually looks on the ground. But to put this into perspective, it was 2015. I was on my way to Peru to do some research. I was going to Machu Picchu, Lake Titicaca, where there is a an entire ancient city at the bottom of the lake. And so Jacques Cousteau did a dive on that, and they presented a story. But and also to study the Andes Mountains. I was not necessarily on my way to Nazca, so this was a surprise for me. But anyway, we flew into Lima, rented a car, and in 11 days put 3,000 kilometers on that vehicle. And it's not like renting a car like in Europe or the United States. It was a rather older car, but it worked. Let me just and it's quite a job driving around the Andes Mountains. But so anyway, I went from Lima to Nazca, and then to Cusco, and did some basic research on the Incas out of Cusco, then to Machu Picchu, took the train out to the Machu Picchu site. And that was very interesting. A lot of good research came out of that. And then down to Lake Titicaca and over to Bolivia, and then drove down to the coastal road, and then all the way back to Lima on the coastal road. And that, if you ever want to drive that coastal road coming up from Bolivia to Lima, is amazing. It's uh, like Big Sur to the 10th power. Anyway, but so I happened to stop at Nazca, and knowing that it was a tourist place, and I really never studied it, thought about it before, put much interest in it. And so I got there pretty late in the evening, so the sun was going down, and I was able to get my bearings there just to get a little idea. And then I went back and I spent a number of days studying the Nazca lines, what information was available, what did they look like. And there's a lot of aerial photography that's been done. So these were originally discovered in 1940 or 41 by a man named Paul Cossack. And he was a pilot, a World War II pilot, and he was flying over Peru when he noticed these line structures down there. And the natives knew about them, but they really didn't know much about them. They knew that the Incas, they were first reported in, I believe, 1533, when the Spanish came through. One of the conquistadores put it in his records that these lines were there, but at the time they thought they were just like walking paths. They really didn't understand, they didn't get the perspective that you do from aerial photography. So, at any rate, not what much was known other than they were not part of the Incas' artwork. These were put together prior to the Incas arriving on the scene. So a long time ago, let's put it that way. And we don't know who. And when you start to learn about these, we don't know if, well, we just can't say what entities, I'll just call them entities, may have done this. First of all, I'll go through a little bit of my background, which would allow you to uh, understand my perspective when I'm looking at these. Of course, I have a uh, advanced physics degree in nuclear and solid state physics. And not getting a PhD was possibly one of the best decisions I made when I was at Tulane. They offered me the PhD track after I got my master's degree, and I said no. And I went back out of the country to teach for 4 years. Set me on a track that ended up being at Cornell University. I would not have made it there if I would have gotten a PhD. So a lot of twists in life, but the thing that the master's degree in physics uh, got me was the ability to do many, many different things. So I spent 25 years of my professional life in telecommunications as a principal systems engineer, both hardware and software. And no, I was not a programmer. I was a systems engineer, design engineer, but designing circuit boards and understanding antennas, telecommunication protocols, and then also radio astronomy, antenna design, understanding atmospheric electricity. And so by the time 2015 rolled around, I was well aware of Tesla's work with atmospheric electricity and garnering energy from the atmosphere, archaeoastronomy, and archaeology in general, and just the study of the ancients. And don't ever think that you're not going to be surprised if you study the ancients. Okay, so anyway, visiting Nazca the second time, I walked up on some mounds, and we're going to see a whole set of slides here in a minute regarding the mounds. But these mounds are built, and they're very instrumental in the Nazca line. So I go up on top of these mounds. They're about 100 feet high and maybe about 150 feet circle at the base. But they're not natural. They're man-made, or they're entity-made. These are not natural mounds. And what I noticed is all of the lines came up and joined at the top of these mounds, all of the Nazca lines. And looking out over the Nazca lines, over the fields, over the plains of Peru, I realized that these were printed circuits, like a printed circuit board. These were not just haphazard lines from people that just didn't have anything to do one day, and so they made some walking paths. No, these were very well designed. And then I started to really study this. And when it occurred to me, I'm standing on top of this mound and I'm feeling the atmospheric electricity because I'm up a couple of 100 feet above the plane. And I know what atmospheric electricity feels like. You can feel it. You can feel like your hair kind of stands on end. So at any rate, let's jump into the slides here, and I'll go through these. And remember that I have a paper on my webpage discussing this entire topic, along with there's an addendum. There's other addendums coming out very soon, and this is ongoing research. So let's pull up some slides here. This is a photo album, and the title is The Nazca and Palpa Lines, Peru, The Mystery Solved. Ancient Fractal Antenna Array for Interstellar Communications Powered by Atmospheric Electricity. So we're going to go through all of this. And just want to make clear that Nazca and Palpa are two regions. Nazca is a little town, and it's a region, and then Palpa is just north of there. So it's another set of lines, much older, and we'll go through a lot of photographs here. So let's see. This is the sign as you enter the park. It's like a huge park. It's 200 square kilometers of open desert, but you can see the desert in the background. You can see the Andes Mountains in the background, which rise off of this plateau. So um, this is an example of one of the Nazca lines. Now you can see they're very meticulously made. And what they do here is there are little rocks, and they're very high iron content, and they simply move them to make these lines. And when you look at these on the ground, they're very meticulously made. And the base underneath this, you can see these thousands and thousands of little rocks, and they're moved aside to make these troughs. And so the question is, what went in these troughs? And I'll get to that later. But you can see how they're about a meter wide, up to a number of meters wide, and very the surveying that went into doing this. Now I'm going to tell you that from being there on the ground, this could only have been surveyed from up above, because the ground is not flat; it's undulating. And the only way you could do this is if the surveyor were up in the air, quite a ways up in the air. Going to the next slide. Let's see if we can get the next slide here. Board up. Oops, we're having a problem. It's not advancing. Can you click on it? Hmm. Uh, uh, can we try and skip one? Okay, okay, here we go. Thank you. This is the corner of what is known as a fractal antenna. Now, your cell phone today, every cell phone today has a fractal antenna. And look at the shape there. Look at the kind of wing-like shapes. And this is a symmetrical fractal cell phone antenna. Small, but very powerful. And we're going to see some of the Nazca lines. Now, this is the radiation pattern from that antenna in your cell phone. So it can receive and send. That's very important to understand that. Okay, so now here, if you take a look, this is one of the Nazca lines, looking from a distance. And this is the picture I showed a little earlier on the ground. This is, you can see the wings. It was one of the, I think it was the right wing here. But this is a series of antennas. Now it has a number of types of antenna. In fact, on the very nose side, you see a lobe, excuse me, which is a shunt, which is a electrical circuit type of circuit. But anyway, it has a very long nose. It's a bird. It looks like one of those old-fashioned television antennas, UHF, VHF, television antennas that people would have on their house. But there's three different types of antennas in this particular figurine on the ground. And now these are, in some cases, hundreds of meters long. Okay, now this is a central hub, and I'm standing on top of it, taking a picture, looking out over the Nazca lines, and you can see the lines congregating on this hub and going out into the desert. These then connect the various figurines that are out in the desert into an array. So this is an electrical circuit. Okay, here's another photograph. And by the way, the white here is just overexposure, but you can see all of these lines congregating on the mounds. And these are artificial mounds, like I say, out in the middle of the desert. See if we can get one more slide in here. We have a break coming up. Okay, now this is the what is known as the monkey. Now, most people, when they see a photo, is just the monkey itself with the spiral tail. But what's interesting is this is adjacent to two fractal antennas. So we have a break coming up here. We'll be back in a couple minutes and continue on this adventure. Okay, okay, back again. And the monkey is one of the most interesting. And now these are whimsical figures. Somebody was playing with us. This is thousands of years and much prior to the Inca civilizations. Okay, so we see a monkey, we see the spiral tail, and next to the monkey is this grid. Now you see also the monkey's arms are out and they're not touching, and you see a fractal antenna coming out of the spiral, that zigzag, and then a line and another zigzag. Those are fractal antennas. Those are classic fractal antennas and the spiral itself. Now, something here, if you take and trace these lines, they never cross, they never touch, and that's an indication that it's a circuit. Look in the arm, for example, the left arm of the monkey, and you'll see that the line stops and then it continues, and then on the other arm it breaks again. That's an indication this is an electrical circuit. And so here's a diagram coming up of the entire, this is a drawing of the monkey. You can see the rectangular fractal antenna on the right hand side, then the zigzag, then the monkey. Now, if you start at the beginning of the right sized rectangular fractal antenna and trace it all the way around, it's a single line. It's a single line around the spiral, around the tail, coming back, etc. The other thing that happens is then the right side of that fractal antenna runs off to one of the mounds. So these are all connected. Okay, here's another one. This is called the parrot, and you can see that there's enough of the parrot here to actually see the shape, but it's primarily fractal antenna. But the base is damaged. The base of the parrot has been damaged. And now you see also other lines that go on top of this. So these were done in generations. Other groups would come along afterwards and put more fractal antennas and different types of antennas on top of older ones. Okay, so this is the paper. This is available on my webpage. It goes through this entire topic. It's called The Nazca and Palpable Lines, Peru, The Mystery Solved. That's available on my webpage. Now here's a picture of the stones, and these are scattered, thousands and thousands of them, and they're very high content iron. You can see the red, and so that makes them conductors. The whole plane is covered with these, and then underneath is this super fine cream colored sand. So when they move the rocks into these rows outside of the to form the shapes, then it leaves the cream colored sand barren, and you can see these from basically outer space. They're visible from outer space. And also something I have an addendum, you can see the upper side of these rocks are filled with micro holes, which would indicate that these were bombarded potentially by microdiamonds coming in at very high velocity. That's a topic that I'm actually researching right now. Okay, now here is one of the most famous figures of the Nazca lines. It is called the spider, and it represents a type of spider. There's a photograph of this spider on the left-hand side. The problem is this species of spider is only found in the Amazon jungle of Brazil, 1,500 kilometers away. And here it is in the Nazca lines. In fact, most of the animals and plants from the Nazca lines are not from this part of the world. You have the whale, you have the parrot, you have seaweed, you have other animals that are not from this part of the world. This is a photograph of the office of Marie Reich. She was a German teacher that came to this part of the world to teach the embassy people, and ended up gaining an interest in the Nazca lines. And this is part of the museum now that is there. So anyway, she is instrumental in the study and preservation of the Nazca lines. Okay, so here's some other Nazca lines, and you can see that they all have the same characteristic. That, for example, look at the lower left-hand corner. The dog has it's a complete single line that draws the dog, and then off of the tail comes a line that goes back to the hubs. All of these have a line that carries them off back to the hub. Okay, the spider is one continuous line. We've already seen the spider. Okay, so this is one of the more famous ones also. It's called the condor. Fractal antenna, and like all the others, it connects back to the base. And now the upper left-hand corner, you can see one of the mounds where all of these lines are congregating. Do you see that kind of bump? The upper left-hand corner, that's one of the mounds. That's where all of these congregate. And that's where I'll be talking about gathering atmospheric electricity to power these antenna arrays and how that works, the electronics, etc. Okay. um, we're having a little problem earlier with the slide pack advancing here. Let's see. Waiting for it to advance. The other thing is, while we're looking at this, oh, okay. It must be on my end that I'm not seeing it. Okay. maybe go to the next slide because it's not coming back to me here. Um, the pelican here, which is, once again, you see the lines going back and forth. This is the pelican. You can see that his beak is a fractal antenna, and his body is enough of a body that you can tell it's the pelican. And then on the right-hand side, pure fractal antenna. So sorry about that. We're having a little technical difficulty with the slides. Oh, okay. Advance the slide, please. Okay, here's a map of the palpa lines. And so we won't concentrate too much on this, but this gives you an idea of the size and the dimension of these relative to the countryside. There's a river, a series of rivers going through also. These are more diagrams of the palpa lines. And okay, so now this is one of my favorite antennas. And after visiting Nazca, this is actually at the palpa site. This is a pure fractal antenna. Now, this is the diagram that was made from the aerial view of the site. And you can tell clearly this is a fractal antenna, classic fractal antenna. The interesting thing is it points to the Old North Pole, which is up in Hudson Bay. And that's a topic unto itself. This is an aerial photograph of that actual site. So you can see it. It's undulating hillside. The only way you could possibly survey and build this site is from above. This is at the palpa site. Okay, once again, we're taking a look at the fractal antenna that would be in a cell phone, what it looks like. I wanted to review this so that you could compare this to the actual diagrams on the ground. This is a fractal antenna with the triangles removed. It's compact and very powerful. Here are some other examples of fractal antennas, different designs. And of course, fractal is where you make smaller and the same shape, smaller and smaller. Okay, so the hands, this is one of the palpa lines, is a classic fractal antenna. If you look at it and you understand the principles of fractal geometry, this is a classic. Now remember, this is thousands of years prior to the Incas populating this area. Now this is the Nazca lines, showing the Nazca lines relative to the road. The road is the dotted line going through the middle. And it shows the location of the different major figurines. And also point out that there are 4 spirals here. There's the monkey tail, there's a flower, and then there's 2 separate spirals. And this will come in later when we start finding these in other places around the world. Okay, other examples of fractal antennas. The bird, you can see the hummingbird connects back to the main network through the beak, which is a bipole antenna. Okay, so there are 5 major antenna designs in the Nazca palpa complex. And the first one is the simple dipole. That's a straight line. Cross dipole is where you have 2 straight lines that cross. The zoomorphic fractal, which is the whimsical characters like the animals, and then geometrical fractals, which are the geometrical shapes. Then composite, zoological, and geometrical fractal combined. And then the last one is the interferometer composite made up of all of these combined. So the interferometer is, we'll have some examples here of modern interferometers. Now, this is a map of the entire site to give you an idea of the complexity. Some of these lines, see over in the left-hand side, you see that kind of star array of bipolar antennas, dipole antennas. radiating out from one of the mounds. These are connected, and if you were to play this, it would, with the overtones of the antennas, etc., this would sound like a grand piano playing. And now, how do they do this? Well, that's one of the other topics that I'll talk about. How do you garner atmospheric electricity, and how do you change it into signals that then drive these antenna arrays? This is a picture of a modern, very large array interferometer radio telescope out, I believe it's in the New Mexico desert. And these are on railroad tracks. These move, and the concept of an interferometer is that if you take one of those telescopes and focus in on a radio telescope object, the disk is the gathering power for energy that you would then send through electronics to amplify. But if you put these in a big array like this, the entire group gives you the circumference, the diameter of the entire group without building an antenna that large. So this is a modern interpretation. Here we have the bird. This is a picture of the hummingbird again, with the beak connecting into the main hub. Here's a picture on the ground of the very large array. And they, a lot of times, if they're looking out into the universe, they're looking at what is known as the water frequency. I think it's a 1420 megahertz signal, and that is a very common signal you look for in outer space for signatures of planets and other life in the universe. And it could be that that is the signal that would be used in the Nazca lines. This is a picture of the Arecibo telescope, which is no longer in existence. It broke, but 305 meters in diameter. This is about the size of the which one of the bird Nazca lines. It's about the same size as this major radio telescope. Okay, so now what happens in the paper that's available online, the end chapters go into radio antenna design, and this is a very complicated topic where you take the designs that are there, surveyed on the ground in Nazca, and then you build a computer model of that antenna and then understand its signaling capabilities for receiving and transmitting, and for the overtones. What does this antenna sound like? What is its directional capabilities? Antennas are very complicated animals in the electronics industry. Here's a set of black spirals in South Africa. Perfect antenna array. We find these all over the world. After I published this paper in 2015, people started writing all over. The pilot from Vietnam, American pilot who was flown a lot of flights in Vietnam, sent me aerial photos of Vietnam. We'll probably have a couple of them here. This is the part 2 addendum to the paper, and this goes into further research, and there are other addendums coming, but there are so many aspects to this. These are some of the topics that are currently under research. Advanced technology in an ancient world, other similar line systems around the world, South Africa, Ethiopia. Where are the antennas pointed to? Interstellar travel from nearby stars. And I talk about interstellar travel and interstellar communication. So the antenna design, advanced technology, and then lost civilizations. Who built the Nazca Palpa antenna complex, and why? Did they build it for us to find? Because we would need to have flight. We would need to understand atmospheric electricity. We would have to understand not only antenna design, but fractal antenna design. Fractal antennas have only been known about in the world of modern electronics for about 25 years. That's when they were discovered. Here we have ancient civilizations making giant fractal antenna arrays out in the middle of the desert. That's unbelievable. I mean, we don't know who did this. This is a published, peer-reviewed paper dealing with fractal antennas. And this was one of the early papers on this. It's one of hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed published papers on the subject of fractal antennas. Oh, and this is a diagram, a photo. When I got back to Lima, I asked, "Where's a good restaurant?" Because after 11 days on the road and 3,000 kilometers, so they told me to go down to the seafood. This is where they bring the fish in. So the top picture is of the seafood, and the bottom picture is what I happened to eat that night at the seafood restaurant, which is right next to the uh, right next to uh, the fish shop where they bring all the seafood, where the seafood is sold. The restaurant is right next door. Okay, back again. Well, I hope you found that interesting. Like I say, the full paper is on my webpage. These were a few of the pictures from that paper. Then there's the addendum, and then there's two more addendums coming out. This is very interesting. There are so many aspects. When you discover something like this, especially when it's unexpected, it's what can you say? This is one of the rarest. I have other archaeological discoveries, but this one I have to say is probably the most unique and interesting, and that's something that I'll be pursuing again in the near future. Peru is a very interesting country. Driving around Peru is amazing. The Andes Mountains, it's a stark country with a lot of uh, uh, small towns in the middle of the Andes Mountains. It's a very interesting place. And on the way back, the coastal road, there's a site coming back from Bolivia up to Lima, Peru. There's a site that extends for probably maybe 20, 30 miles along the coast. That's an ancient city where estimated 14 million people lived back pre-Inca also. There's not a potsherd, there's nothing that remains at all. In fact, the belief is that a giant tsunami came in and washed it all away, and there's really nothing left except the foundations of these structures that covered this vast amount of area, and there's no history. We don't know anything about it, who lived there. But at any rate, okay, so now we're heading into the another topic here tonight, and this I'm going to cover over a number of different shows. It's dealing with atmospheric electricity, but where does that come from? And it turns out that the solar system, our sun specifically, is a very electrical item. And how does that work? Where does this come from? And I can tell you right now that the standard scientific communities don't know about this. They have been locked into this kind of a mantra that there's no electricity in outer space. It's completely wrong. Outer space is filled with electrical batteries. I identified 17 of them just around Earth itself. And then there's a large capacitor that forms. And when you understand this, all of a sudden, everything in outer space starts to make sense, the things that you actually can visualize. But to begin this, I just want to start out by saying that in 2018, this is following a space mission called the Rosetta mission. It was performed by the European Space Agency. That they landed on the nucleus of a comet, and many spacecraft had flown by comets before, had been in orbit around comets, but finally they actually landed on the surface of a comet nucleus. There was no water, there was no ice, there was no snow, and there was no water vapor coming off the nucleus in any way, shape, or form. And the closest they found water to the nucleus was 10 kilometers, a long ways. And so, at any rate, the head of NASA science got up to the podium and stated for the record that comets are not dirty snowballs, that they now know that, which means that I've been right for the past 50 years with the work that I've been doing and the plasma discharge comet model. But anyway, what I want to uh, give you is the basics of the all of the details. Why is there electricity in outer space? How does it work? And we've got a set of slides here I want to show you. And this is related to some videos that I have. These are on my webpage. But these are what I call historically important videos. And this is it's in a 2-disc set. If you want to believe it or not, that's me in 1986. I'm giving a lecture. This is a pre-lecture, but it was basically at Los Alamos National Laboratories, where I'm discussing my work with the top plasma physicists in the world that are located at Los Alamos. And these are tier 1 scientists. There I'm again. You can see the drawing on the blackboard or the whiteboard there. And these are all in video form. These are just screenshots of the videos. This is one of the slides presenting how the electrical discharges pass over the nucleus of a comet. This is from a comet paper that I wrote called Dynamics of a Small Comet. And so I'm just going to quick branch through these. This is from a film that was made. I was teaching astronomy in the University of Minnesota college system, and I was teaching astronomy, and they had grants. And so I got the grant, and I made this video. It's called Astronomy for the 90s, and you can see all the astronomy textbooks on the desk. And so that's me, a little bit older. Here's I'm talking at the Golden Wings Conference in Denver, Colorado. These are all, as you can see, I'm getting older here. This is disc number 2, and contains 3 other videos here. This is myself in front of a group. This was filmed for cable TV, and it aired all over the country. It was actually filmed in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here I am at the 2003 International UFO Congress as a lead speaker, talking about the issues of planetary objects. And here I am the next year, 2004, talking at the International UFO Congress. And the topic of this show, this presentation, was electric highways to the stars, where I talk about electric conditions and electrical conditions in outer space and how to use them for propulsion. I had invented a number of propulsion systems that were then put into the what I would say tier 1 or military science through venture capital groups out of Los Angeles. Okay, so let's see, we have 46. I think we have time here for the video. There's a video I have, and it's from one of these clips that I just showed you. And this is going to be somewhat of an introduction, and I'll continue this in future weeks. But let's go to the video if we can. It's about 6 minutes long, and then we'll come back for the wrap-up of the show.
Capacitor, and bam, it discharges. Where does it discharge? At the location of the bug. It doesn't discharge up over here someplace. It discharges where the bug is. And that's the exact same thing that happens when a chunk of rock, big or small, comes into our solar system from a distance. It discharges that capacitor and forms a comet. Now, the part of the comet we don't see is the electrical current of electrons, because electrons have 1/2000th the mass of a proton, and they're hundreds of times less massive than dust particles or other molecules. So the electrons move the fastest in this electrical discharge, and they create the entire, just about 99% of the electrical current flow is in the form of electrons coming out from the sun. And when it hits the cloud, the initial cloud of the comet, it interacts with them, and it causes a thing called bremsstrahlung X-rays. It caused me in 1979 to make a prediction that would prove conclusively that comets could not be dirty snowballs. This was discovered in 1996. They were totally amazed, but yet comets are still dirty snowballs. And no mention of my theoretical work at all. But anybody can see that with this electron current coming in from the sun, that as it began to interact with the comet atmosphere out there, those electrons would slow down, And they were also seeing the electric field of the comet itself and caused a thing called Bremsstrahlung X-rays. And there are other types of X-rays associated with comets, but that's the primary type. So at any rate, let me move on. And I think it's important to kind of give you a vision of our solar system from a distance. That's one of the more important things I want to leave you with. Okay. This is a picture of Comet Hale-Bopp. And it was taken by an astronomer in Florida through what is known as a swan filter. And now the picture of Hale-Bopp you're typically, or a comet that you're normally used to seeing, is the long, white coma, and maybe a nice roundish tail with the dust tail, they call that, with the type 2 tail, which is the thinner type 2, like thinner tail. Anyway, this is a picture of a comet, a big comet. Now remember that NASA didn't want to tell you, but the size of the nucleus in there is half the size of our moon. These tentacles that you see are strictly water. Now, it's not just any water. It's triply ionized oxygen on the water molecule, and it's doubly ionized hydrogen. You know what kind of energy you need to do that? This is not sublimating off a nice little melting snowball. This is high energy stuff. It has X-rays coming out of it. The tentacles, I made an estimate, there's probably 2 to 3 million amperes of current flowing in each one of those tentacles. That picture, I believe, has 17. And when you look at the real-time video through one of these filters, those tentacles are out there like this. They're waving around like big snake tails. Now, if we would have gone through Hale-Bopp, if we would have been 3 months earlier in our orbit, we would have been literally flooded. This Earth would have taken on a tremendous amount of pollution in the form of water, hydrocarbons, and what the ancients talk about, the rain of brimstone and fire, the meteor streams, the hydrocarbons was the oil, which we have plenty on this Earth. And by the way, it's my contention that oil is not a byproduct of plant life. It is a byproduct of being involved in interactions with comets, because that's where the hydrocarbons are in abundance. Where were the fern forests that grew under the oceans? There couldn't be any. Where did the salt come from that are in the oceans? It came from outside. Where did the water come from that pumped up that storm on November 9th last year in the central US? It came from outside. There's a guy named Lou Frank who was laughed at, was not allowed to put his instruments on one of the UV explorers, and that's the UV is one of the primary ways we view water on this planet from outside. And he knew from one of the early UV Explorer satellites that he was seeing water traces in the upper atmosphere. And he made a suggestion that little comets were coming in and melting as they came in. And he was laughed at, so they wouldn't let him put an instrument on the next one. And somehow he snuck an instrument onto one of those satellites, and it got up there. And he actually made the readings, and sure enough, water is coming into our upper atmosphere, and they don't understand what the process is. Well, the process is we are a comet too. We are in the solar capacitor, and we discharge it just like comets do. The reason we don't discharge it to this level is because we're in a nice circular orbit. But when the comets come in on elliptical orbits, they're breaking in perpendicular to the field lines, just like the bug is in the bug zapper, and they're causing a very large cometary reaction. And so Venus, Velikovsky's Venus, as it came into the solar system, and its orbit became circularized and interacted with Earth and the other planets. We know it interacted with Mars. Its orbit became circularized. It interacted with Earth on 2 occasions 57 years apart. We know that from the Mayan calendar. The Mayans structured their calendar partly on Venus. One of the wheels in the Mayan calendar is Venus. And so when all of these cycle up, and people talk about the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, that's simply the end of all of the rotations of all the wheels in the Mayan calendar. It doesn't mean it's the end of the Earth, and the Mayans knew better than anybody that these are the lawless ones. They don't follow regular patterns. They knew that. So, at any rate, this is a big comet. That's what it looks like. It's a high energy object. And if we would have been caught in one of those, or if we have the misfortune to be caught in the tentacle arms of one of these big comets that pass through.
Okay, we're back again. And so that was me over 20 years ago giving this talk. So the reason I'm showing these is because my work goes back literally close to 50 years. And at some point, I'll show some of the other earlier videos where I'm much younger. But anyway, this is a topic that I'm going to be talking a lot about because I want the general public to understand the real sources of electricity in outer space. Now, interestingly enough, and I don't know if this is why, but when the chief scientist at NASA made the announcement about dirty snowballs and comets not being dirty snowballs, he left. Why would somebody leave the top job in the country, the top science job in the country, to work in a small company in Europe? Anyway, the unfortunate thing is that they're still plugging this dirty snowball comet model. It's really on the level of corruption because, anyway, I'm not going to go into that really on this show, but you think about that. When we know for a fact scientifically that something is false and they keep pounding the pavement with it, there's something wrong. Okay, so we've got a couple minutes to go here. If you want, let's play the last clip here because I have a short clip talking about my latest video. It's called Eclipse, the New Cosmology. Take a second to check out the webpage, jmccanneyscience.com. The short URL is jmccsci.com. My latest release, eDVD, Eclipse, the New Cosmology, goes through all of the things that you have to know to understand this radical change that is really taking place right now, and with the Big Bang simply going away overnight, something I did not expect. We knew 50 years ago that the Big Bang did not work, but finally the James Webb Telescope data is putting it to rest. Go visit the webpage jmccsci.com.